Hello and welcome back to another full step-by-step PC build guide, and today I'm going to be showing you how to build a PC in the NZXT H5 Flow. Now this is the new updated 2024 version of the case, and if you see any parts you like in the build, you'll find links to all the parts I've used in the description. So as usual, let's make a start by taking a detailed look at the case. To remove our tempered glass side panel, there's a notch at the back you can get your fingers behind, then pull it out and lift up and away. To remove our other side panel, there's two captive thumb screws at the back which we're going to need to loosen, and once they've been loosened we're able to tilt the panel out, pull backwards and lift away. You'll notice we've got this large perforated panel on the bottom of our right side panel, and this is to provide a source of airflow for bottom mounted fans on our power supply shroud. And this theme continues on the other side of the case. We've got this large perforated area here, and actually the mesh continues underneath here at an angle, and this should provide a really good source of airflow if you do decide to mount fans above the power supply shroud. Taking a look at our top I/O, we've got a power button, a single USB Type A, a single USB Type C, and a combined headphone and microphone jack. To remove our case's top panel, there's a captive thumb screw at the back we need to loosen. Then we're going to be able to pull the panel backwards and lift up and away. And if we take a look at the panel we've just removed, you'll notice there's no additional dust filters on it. To remove our case's front panel, you can simply get your fingers in behind the mesh panel and pop it off. And again, there's no additional dust filters included. So with our front panel removed, you can see we've got three 120mm fans installed at the front. These are actually all one piece. There's three separate fan blades, but the actual bodies of the fans are all combined. This is a 3-pin fan connector, so you're going to have to run it in DC mode, but it does have RGB on it. If you prefer at the front, it is possible to mount up to two 140mm fans, or up to a 360 or 280mm radiator. At the rear of the case, we've got another 120mm fan pre-installed. Again, we've got a 3-pin connector, and this time it's a non-ARGB fan. If you prefer, you can mount up to 120mm radiator at the rear. Up top, it's up to two 120 or 240mm fans, or up to 240 or 280mm radiator. You're probably safer going with a 240mm radiator at the top, because if you do go with a 280mm radiator, there may be some clearance issues, particularly with your RAM, and you're going to have to use low-profile RAM. You're also going to mount two 120mm fans in our power supply shroud, and you see we do have small screw holes here. So the idea is you're going to set your fan on top, and then you're going to use the long radiator screws that come in the case accessory box and screw them down through your fan, securing it to the bottom of the case. In terms of motherboard support, the case supports motherboards up to E/ATX in size, and you want to go with a CPR cooler. The maximum height supported is up to 175mm. You'll notice that our standoffs are quite close to our cable management bar, so if you do want to go with an E/ATX motherboard, you are going to have to remove this cable bar. It's held on with 4 screws at the back, and then with the 4 screws removed, you can simply lift the cable bar out, and you'll notice that we do have additional screw holes here. So all you would simply need to do is move the cable bar over, and you'll notice there's 2 additional screw holes at the top that we can put the screws back into, and also one at the bottom. So you can see that's now made additional space for an E/ATX motherboard. You can see at the rear of the case we've got 7 horizontal PCI expansion slot brackets, and in terms of graphics card support, the maximum length supported is up to 425mm. Moving to the rear of the case, and cable routing space looks quite good at 28.7mm. We've got plenty of metal clips to help organise the cable, as well as plenty of Velcro cable straps. We've got a hard drive cage at the bottom of the case, and this is where we're going to find our case accessory box. To remove it, there's a captive thumb screw at the bottom we need to loosen, and then we're going to be able to pull the whole thing backwards to remove it. So this is everything that comes in our case accessory box. So we've got all our screws individually labelled with their size, although it would be much more useful they're actually labelled with their function, for example, motherboard screw. And here we've got some additional cable ties as well. And if we take a look at the bottom of the case, you'll notice there's 2 different positions the hard drive cage can be secured in. So in this hard drive cage, you're going to be able to mount up to 2 2.5-inch drives plus a 3.5-inch drive. So you're going to simply slot your 2.5-inch drives in from the front, and you're going to secure each of them with 2 screws at each side. Your 3.5-inch drive, you're simply going to set on top, and then you're going to be able to secure it in from underneath with 4 screws. The case is compatible with full-sized ATX power supplies up to a maximum length of 200mm. The most important thing to point out here is the bottom of the case is solid. So when you install your power supply, you're going to want to install it with the fan facing up the way. So good news, I've got a helper to help me build the PC. This is my youngest son, Matthew, and he's got the day off school today. So why are you off school today?
It's open out.
Open, so I've given the day off. So rather than spend it playing games on the PC, he's actually going to try and build the PC with me today. You built one before with me on the channel, I think it was a few years ago.
Yeah.
Can you remember how to do it?
No.
No, not at all. That's okay. Well, what I'll do is I'll talk you through the build, and you're in luck today. This is going to be a really straightforward build. Anytime you're putting an air cooler into a system, you're going to have a much easier time than when you've got an AIO. And anytime there's minimal ARGB, which we've got today, you're going to have a pretty simple build. So if you are a first-time builder, this should be a pretty easy build to do. So I'll talk Matthew through the build. Okay, so we're actually going to do most of the work on the table. So we're going to be installing our CPU, our M.2 SSD, and our RAM, and actually our CPU cooler before we put this motherboard into the case. Okay, so you're going to have to open that CPU socket, so I'll hold the motherboard steady. So you push that lever down, you bring it all the way to the top, and then you're going to be able to open the socket that way. So you can see we've got all the pins in the socket, and this is what we're going to have to be really careful we don't damage. So when you're lowering your CPU down, you're going to want to be really careful that you're not putting it onto those pins and damaging them. Okay, so if you want to lower the CPU down into the socket, nice and gently, just move it up a little bit. Yeah, that's you. Up it this way. Yeah. Yeah, that's you. Now, if you want to check, do you think that's sitting right? How you check, give it a little wiggle from side to side and up and down. And there's no movement on it. It's in the socket. So you want to close that white cover down again. And then you're going to close that lever. So close it down. That's normal. Don't worry, don't panic. We can take that off and we'll put that in the motherboard box. I didn't tell you that just to see what you would do. Yeah. So go ahead and close it down. And you have to get it onto that clip. Good job, CPU's installed. Okay, so next we've got our M.2 SSD and we're going to install it in this top slot. So see the little lever over that side? So you're going to push that lever up, tilt it up that way. Yeah, and then pull it towards you. And that's it removed. We've got a little heat pad here, so we're going to need to remove this plastic protection. So you want to get that off. And then you want to remove the plastic protection from the heatsink as well. The gold contacts in your M.2 SSD are going to go into the slot here, so you want to line them up. That's you. There. Let's see. Now, to install it, all you're going to do is push it down. So push it down and the clip is going to close on it. Perfect. And then next thing you want to do is put your heatsink back on. Just push straight down. You don't need to worry about the clip. It'll lock itself. So perfect. M.2 is now installed. Okay, so we're ready to install the RAM. We've got 2 sticks of RAM, so we're going to want to install it in the 2nd and 4th slot along from the CPU. So you want to open the clips in the RAM. Get your finger just on the outside here. Let's see. That's you. Yeah, and do the other one on the other side. And then do the 4th one along both sides. So first thing you want to do is get the RAM lined up at the top. So slide it into the socket and get the gold contacts to go in at one side and then the other side, just at the very top. Don't slide it down. That's in one side. If you've got it in both sides, let it go and it will go down. If you're in the socket, yeah. So what you can do is you want to put firm pressure down. So just both sides at the top and give it a good push. Push down. Yeah, nice and strong. And the clips are closed, secured in the socket. And that's actually one of the most common reasons your PC doesn't work at the end, is you just haven't put it in properly. And for a new builder, it is always a worry about giving it a good strong push. But as long as you check it's in the socket right, you shouldn't do any harm. Okay, so do you want to do the second one? Okay, that looks like you're in, so give it a good push. Yep, spot on, that's nice and secure. Okay, next thing to do is install the backplate for our CPU cooler. So we've got an LGA 1851, which is the same holes as an LGA 1700 motherboard. So we're going to want to make sure we pull all these standoffs to the outer setting. So I think these 3 are. Do you want to give this one a bit of a pull, Matthew? Just needs to go lift it off the back of the motherboard so we don't damage it. Give that a wee pull that way. So you're better if you put your hand here and you can just pull it out. So they're all in the outer setting. So they should line up with the holes in the back of the motherboard. So you want to line that up with the holes. And once it's lined up, it should just fall through. Yeah, good job. Okay, and then we've got one of these standoffs to go onto each corner. So you want to screw the top ones on, I'll do the bottom ones. Okay, and then we've got one of these brackets to go on at the top and one at the bottom. And there is a little arrow which points towards the CPU, so just make sure you put it on the right way around. So with the arrow pointing towards the CPU. Yeah, and then we've got a thumb screw to go onto each corner. Okay, so now we've got them all in. Do you want to just give them a quick tighten with a screwdriver? Next, we just need to add some thermal paste to the center of the CPU. Perfect. So do you want to pop some on? If you're using the CPU cooler from new, remember to remove the plastic protection from the cold plate. Okay, so the first thing we're going to need to do with our CPU cooler is remove this little bit of metal on the top of it. It's just held on magnetically. And then we're going to have to set our top fan up so we're able to screw it in. So you're going to pull those two levers towards each other, and then you should be able to slide the top fan out. Yeah, that should be. Don't pull it all the way out. See, there's cables on it, so all we're going to need to do is just set it up on top. All you're going to want to do is, see the wee brackets under there? They're going to want to line up with the screws and that we put under the brackets in the motherboard. So there's one on each end. So you bring it this way a wee touch. That's it at that bottom end. Is your top end lined up? Harder to see up there, isn't it?
Yeah.
You can set that fan down now. Okay, so it looks like you're lined up there. So do you want to put your screwdriver down and get it into the hole beneath? And give it maybe about 4 or 5 turns. You feel it catching? Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, then go to the next one at the bottom. Do the same. So now what you're going to do is put the fan back into place. So I'm going to pull the fan cable through as you insert it in. So go ahead. Yep. And just lower it down into place. Push it in all the way in, it'll click. Great. And then you can pop the cover back on top. It just sticks on magnetically. Okay, so next thing for us to do is to plug the fan cable into our CPU fan header. So this one here is our CPU fan header. So do you want to plug the fan cable in? And see the way there's wee notches in the cable. So you push that down, the notches will line up and it will slot into place. And obviously these cables look a little bit untidy sitting out here. So what we can do is just tuck them in underneath the heatsink. Okay, next thing for us to do is install our motherboard into the case. We've got 9 standoffs, which we'll have for a standard ATX motherboard. The one thing about this middle standoff, it doesn't actually have a screw hole in it and it's pretty elongated. The idea behind it is once it goes through the middle hole in your motherboard, it helps hold the motherboard in place. Okay, so then we can set our motherboard into case, line it up with the standoffs. I'll set it in for you because this is quite difficult to do with a big air cooler standing up the way. If you're doing this yourself at home, the best thing would be just to lie the case down on its back. And then you'll notice once we've actually got that middle standoff through the motherboard, I could actually let go and the motherboard would stay where it is. But best thing, just keep a hand on it until we get it screwed in. Then you're going to use 8 of the screws labeled 6-32 by 5mm to secure the motherboard into place. Okay, so the next thing before we put anything else in the build, we're going to want to get all our case cables plugged in. So you can see that header down the bottom left of the motherboard, that's your HD audio. So your headphone and mic jack at the top of the case, the cable coming from it, we're going to need to plug into there so that it works. So I'll pass you the cable through, and you're going to want to plug that on with the HD audio text facing down the way, and then we'll just pull all the excess cable through to the bottom. Okay, so the next one along is an ARGB header. So I'm going to pass you the ARGB cable from our front fan. So do you notice on that header there's 2 pins, a gap and 1 pin, so make sure you plug the cable in the same way round. Okay, and then we'll just pull the excess cable down to the back again. Okay, we've got a system fan header here, so I'm going to pass you the cable coming from our front fan through, and if you want to plug it into that. And again, we just pull the excess cable through to the back as we go. Front panel connector is going to go into this header, and it's the pins towards the left-hand side that we're going to want to use. And you're going to want to plug it in with the front panel text facing up the way, and it's to the pins towards the far left-hand side. Okay, so your front panel type C header is this one here. Pass the cable through to you. Okay, so that's your USB type A cable, so we'll pass it through. Okay, the last cable for us to plug in is the fan connector coming from our rear fan. And we've got a really useful fan connector up here, so it's right beside our fan. So I'll pass the cable through to you, and it's just into this header here that you want to plug it into. Okay, so that definitely wasn't one of the easiest ones to plug in. There is other fan connectors down the bottom of the motherboard that might actually have been easier. So next we've got our power supply to plug in. So we've plugged the cables in that we're going to need. So we've plugged in our 24-pin motherboard cable, an UPS cable to provide additional power to our CPU, and our 12-volt 2x6 cable to power our graphics card. Okay, so we need to install our power supply. Now this case is quite unusual in the fact that at the bottom there's no ventilation. So we are going to have the fan facing up the way. So you're going to set that in. I'll hold these cables up out of the way and then slide it into the bottom and then push it all the way towards the back. And then we're going to use 4 of the hexagon screws, 6-32 by 6mm to secure the power supply into place. Okay, so we've got our 2 8-pin EPS power cables at the top left of the motherboard. I'll pass the cable through to you and you can get it plugged in. Good. So they were an absolute nightmare to plug in, particularly with this large air cooler. So what I would do would definitely with a modular power supply, plug the cable into the motherboard at the start, just leave the cable hanging loose. After you've installed the motherboard, pass the cable through to the back and plug it into your power supply, and that'll be much easier. So all we need to do is pass our excess cable through to the back. Okay, so then you've got your 24-pin power connector. I'll pass it through to you. And then we just pull all the excess cable again through to the back. So we're now ready to install our graphics card. We're going to need to remove the second and third expansion slot cover from the top. To get access to the slot covers, we're going to need to remove this bracket at the front first of all. So you're going to take those two screws out. Okay, so now you can get in from the side and take out the second and third one from the top. Yeah, it should fall into the case. So next thing we need to do is open the clip in the top PCIe slot. And you don't have to worry about fiddling about for it. There's a button here that you're going to press, so you need to give that button a press, and as you do, you'll notice the clip opens on the slot. See the way the clip opened? So this is really handy for getting your graphics card out. Once you've installed it, you're not going to be able to reach here really easily, but actually you should always be able to reach this button without any problem. Okay, so do you want to line the graphics card up with the slot? Now look in and line the graphics card up with the slot, the connectors. Are you happy that's lined up? So just straighten it up here. And then once you're happy it's lined up, give it some firm pressure and it should clip into place. Give it a good push in. There you go, and hear that click, that's it going into place. Okay, so it's just the reverse of what we did earlier on. So now you're going to want to use the two screws to first secure your graphics card in place. Okay, I'll hold that for you if you want to get the screws in. Okay, so I'm just going to pass you through your graphics card cable. So if you look at the cable, there's the 4 pins at the top. So yeah, you're going to want to put it in this way around. And you got a nice click there. So that's really important that these cables go in right. And then what we'll do is we'll just tidy up the cable running through to the back. Okay, last thing for us to do is some cable management to get the panels back on again. So you can see we've got lots of metal clips, Velcro cable straps that should help us organize the cables. Okay, so that's the PC built. I've gone ahead and got everything set up. If you don't know how to do that, including installing Windows, the drivers, the RGB software, entering the BIOS update and the BIOS, and adjusting all the BIOS settings, do you know how to do that? No. You're going to want to check out my guide, and you'll find a link to that video in the description. Taking a look at our temperatures, our Core Ultra 9 285K idled at 35 degrees and reached a maximum 95 degrees during a 10-minute IDO64 stability test. The RTX 4070 Founders Edition idled at 26 degrees and reached a maximum of 68 degrees during the stability test. We had average noise levels of 35 decibels at idle and 42 decibels under load. Okay, so I did tell you that would be a pretty easy build, and actually it took us about an hour and a half to put that together and actually film at the same time. How did you find it?
I thought it was really good, yeah.
No problems?
No problems.
Well, I think the only tricky bits, I think, really was plugging cables in. This is a pretty compact eATX case. You can't actually go as far as. My advice, I think, for building this is the EPS cables at the top, particularly with a large air cooler, are quite difficult to get plugged in. So plug those into your motherboard at the start if you're using a modular power supply. Then just pass the cables out the back and plug them into your power supply. Likewise, I thought the cables on the right-hand side of the motherboard space is a wee bit tight with that cable management bar, particularly that right-angled USB Type-A cable. So I think if you are going to be plugging cables in there, you might be better to take that cable management bar off, get all your cables plugged in, and put the cable management bar on at the end. Okay, so moving on to what we liked about the case, what do you think?
I liked how simple the design is, and how it's like nothing like really complicated in it.
Yeah, so it's a good case, I think, for a beginner to build in, particularly if you're going with a very simple build, although you could make the build really complicated by using fans that connect up with USB, adding hubs into it, and you can even adding an AIO in. I think particularly if you're trying to go with a 280 and getting into RAM compatibility issues, you could make it into a complicated build. I've just picked a nice easy one for somebody who's starting off to follow. I think it's a solid case. Build quality is good. It's very, very hard to actually fault it. I suppose that if I was being nitpicky, it would have been nice to have seen PWM connectors on the fans rather than 3-pin connectors. You would have found those easier to plug in because you wouldn't have to worry about which 3 pins they plugged into. But we could have got those fans running quieter at idle and helped reduce the idle noise level. And given the price point of this case, they really should have had PWM connectors. Again, been nitpicky again. It would have been nice if the screws that came in the case accessory box were labelled with their function rather than the size of the screws. And I do think that silver screws would have worked better in a white case than black screws and black cable ties. I think the only other thing for me is with the RGB fans at the front, they do light up the power supply shroud, so it is possible to see your power supply and cables in that bottom compartment, given that NZXT have gone with so much mesh. So great for airflow, but not so good for aesthetics. But apart from that, really solid case and absolutely delighted with how the build turned out.
If you enjoyed this video, make sure to press the like button and to subscribe and to click on the notification bell so you'll be notified when a new video comes out.